thought that was a really interesting sort of paradox within the survey. That is that the millennials seem to hold this very post-racial view of their generation and of the American society, where race seems to be of little import. Yet at the same time, there's a significant issue that's not being dealt with or not factored in. It seems that is that inequity is obviously very present within our society, and that there are numerous examples of sort of racial discrimination where certain members of certain groups are obviously not included in a great number of sort of auspices of power or authority or even universities. Yet it means within this generation that reality is not reflected in the view that race is of or an ethnicity is not of as great a consequence, despite the evidence.
I think one thing that's important about surveys to note is that how a question is asked or in what type of answers you allow to be responded to very much shapes the way people will respond to that question. And one of the things that was interesting in seeing the response on affirmative action was if you said you supported it, you were allowed to give reasons why you supported it. And the two biggest reasons were to increase diversity, which was the largest, and the second was to redress past wrongs, which was kind of the stated ideology behind affirmative action in the first place. But if you rejected affirmative action, you weren't asked why. And that leaves people like us to do a lot of inferences, because I know plenty of millennials who support it and plenty of millennials who don't. So at that point, I'm left to basic stereotypes, sort of like, well, if you want to increase diversity, then you must be for affirmative action, or if you think everything's just fine, then you aren't for it. And I don't think that's I think there should be more probing of millennials on this issue, because I think because we are the most diverse of American generations yet, I think the impetus is on us to figure out why it is we're succeeding as a diverse particular group. And I think asking the questions of, if you don't think affirmative action does it, then what else might we do to promote diversity? I think there could be valuable opinions in that.
Yeah. Affirmative action is one of the most prominent structures of the past generation, one of their most prominent creations in terms of race issues. And it's meant, like we've talked about, to address past wrongs in a system of inequalities. And so both the system it's operating within and then affirmative action itself are legacies of the past generation. They weren't created by us, and they don't exactly fit our needs, our behaviors, etc. And so I think it's an interesting conflict. It's apparent that there's still racial issues, but we've kind of come to see that this isn't the best way to address them, but we're still operating within the frameworks from past generations. And so, I feel like we have to make more changes than simply ending affirmative action to really come to a place of equality and comfort in terms of racial inclusion. And I think that's something that we kind of need to move past just looking at affirmative action as an issue in terms of diversity in the workplace and in education. And so I think that's something that we kind of focus in on this one specific program, and we don't look at the rest of the system that made this program necessary, that we're still operating within.
One of the reasons why I have a problem with affirmative action as a member of a minority is specifically Asian Americans have faced a lot of historic discrimination. First, immigrant group to be excluded in the 1880s, and then also otherized in terms of exoticism, perpetual foreignness, all these things. And then, but affirmative action doesn't really serve Asian Americans, especially in California, where we're a large portion of the minority, a significant minority. And California doesn't have affirmative action anymore, but there's this myth, the model minority myth, that Asian Americans have made it. And then so affirmative action policies don't serve them, serve other minority groups. And I think what happens when you engage in affirmative action, necessarily you create racial divisions among minority groups themselves. I'm much more in favor of a socioeconomic form of affirmative action. I think that's a much better marker, though I realize there are problems inherent in that as well. But I think, I kind of agree generally with Chief Justice Roberts. She says, if you want to stop considering race, stop considering race. It moves along those lines. And I think it's something we have to, if we really want to reform affirmative action, if we really want to move to a society that really embraces equality among all its members, I don't think affirmative action, the way it's conceived of now, is the right way to move forward at all.
we may be forgetting or neglecting the true sort of struggles and embedded inequities that exist within the institutions of society, the social structures of society, and try to, I don't know if it's necessarily policy, but certainly in terms of our own social interactions, think of a way or think of solutions that seem to want to bring everyone else to the table and have equal access, but recognize that this is not something we can just fiat away by thinking it's done.
I think on that eloquent note,